Minimum equipment list for day VFR, car 605.14. The minimum equipment list tells you basically what things you have to have on board with you in order to legally take off. There's a few different acronyms out there to remember them, but my personal favorite is tomato flame, because it kind of reminds me of hot Cheetos. So, tomato flame. The T is for tachometer. O, oil pressure gauge. M, magnetic compass. A, altimeter. And for altimeter, you've got to remember that if it's in a controlled airspace, it's got to be a sensitive altimeter. If it's in just an uncontrolled airspace, it's just an altimeter. I genuinely don't know what the difference is, but I'm guessing you're going to be taking off from controlled airspace most of the time. So just make sure your altimeter is like a barometric pressure sensitive altimeter. Next T is for timepiece. O, oil temperature gauge. F, fuel gauge. L, landing gear position indicator if it's relevant to you. A, airspeed indicator. M, manifold pressure gauge, again if it's relevant to you. And E, emergency equipment. So just whatever's appropriate for the season and where you're going and stuff. So tomato flame, tachometer, oil pressure gauge, magnetic compass, altimeter or sensitive altimeter, timepiece, oil temperature gauge, fuel gauge, landing gear position indicator, airspeed indicator, manifold pressure gauge, emergency equipment. We'll just say it together again a few times. Again, the acronym is tomato flame, and we'll just go through the list 3 more times. Tachometer, oil pressure gauge, magnetic compass, altimeter, timepiece, oil temperature gauge, fuel gauge, landing gear position indicator, airspeed indicator, manifold pressure gauge, emergency equipment. Again, try and say it with me. Tachometer, oil pressure gauge, magnetic compass, altimeter, timepiece, oil temperature gauge, fuel gauge, landing gear position indicator, airspeed indicator, manifold pressure gauge, emergency equipment. Okay, so next, in order to help you remember it, I'll say the letter in the same tomato flame order, and then you say on your own what it stands for. Okay, so T, tachometer. O, oil pressure gauge. M, magnetic compass. A, altimeter. T, timepiece. O, oil temperature gauge. F, fuel gauge. L, landing gear position indicator. A, airspeed indicator. M, manifold pressure gauge. E, emergency equipment. This question is also sometimes asked by examiners in the spoken portion of the ground exam. So I'll just be the examiner. I'll just straight up ask you. So what is the minimum equipment list for a day VFR? The answer is tachometer, oil pressure gauge, magnetic compass, altimeter, timepiece, oil temperature gauge, fuel gauge, landing gear position indicator, airspeed indicator, manifold pressure gauge, and emergency equipment. And then the thing to remember about the altimeter is if it's in controlled airspace, it's got to be a pressure sensitive altimeter. But if it's an uncontrolled, it could just be any old altimeter. All right, thanks. Bye.